I see me.
Hello, my name's Henry Alvarez, and the performance you're about to see I created based on the civil rights movement in St. Augustine between 1963 and 1965. I used oral history interviews from Dr. Robert Haling, Audrey Nell Edwards, Joanne Anderson, and excerpts from Reverend Ralph Abernathy's book, And the Walls Came Tumbling Down. I hope you enjoy it, and also the experiences in hate and violence that these individuals went through is largely representative of the entire community and their experiences. Thank you.
St. Augustine to me was a very nice town to live in. Washington Street was our main street that had all the black businesses. When we started in the movement, we didn't start off picketing or demonstrating. We would go down to St. Paul's A&ME Church and sit around and just talk about what we were going to do, you know?
I lived on the west side of town. Audrey lived on the north, and things started for me when I asked my mother's permission to go and participate, and they, of course, said yes. So I went over to my sister's house every day, and that's how I got hooked up with them.
But Dr. Haling, he was our advisor, youth advisor, and he just motivated us to want to make a difference.
I had decided to move to St. Augustine to open a dental practice, and the young people came to me and asked, would I consider being the advisor to the NAACP Youth Council? Naturally, I had no reason not to, so I said, yes, I would.
I had seen all the young people gather up at the church down the street from me, so I said, I'm gonna go down there and see what they're doing. But all they was doing was gathering. We had realized that it was time to do something. So a group of us decided that we would go downtown and sit in.
I guess we was just tired of going with the signs. We wanted to make a difference. Just go in, sit down, and ask for service.
We went down St. Francis Street and turned down Washington Street. And as we were going down, the barber came out and said to us, where y'all going? We said, we're going to sit in. He said, who told y'all to sit in? Don't. Where are those picket lines? We said we left them at the church. We're going to sit in.
Our perspective was we just wanted to go on in and sit down, and I guess the local NAACP wanted a little more time. But for us, it was like we need to go in there, sit in, and ask for service. Mm-hmm. And when we did, we met our adversary who told us they don't serve niggas here and that we needed to leave or be arrested.
But we continued sitting at the counter, and they said, we told you if you don't leave, you will be arrested.
We was unlawful guests. We were undesirable guests. We were trespassing, and if we didn't leave, we would be carried to jail. And that's just what happened.
When we were taken down to the jail, they hadn't put us in cells yet. So all 16 of us were just there singing.
We had no sense of fear because we were all together as a group.
At first, it was fun. We had all of us just singing and clapping because we knew we were fitting to leave. But then that didn't happen. We went to court the next morning, and that's when everything spiraled out of control.
The judge had a petition for our parents to sign stating we wouldn't demonstrate until we were 21 years old. And of course, we said, no, don't sign. We was 2 days in jail. Then it was a week, then 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, then finally to our reform school.
But Joanne and myself, we seen our mother's pain when they came up to that school and seeing our bloody knees. We had to wax and buff the floors until you could see your face in them. If they weren't not right, you got to do it all over again.
Being locked up for so long in isolation once we arrived to that school, we were 77 days in jail, and we was 52 days at that school.
Dr. Haling made us feel like we were doing something right. Regardless to whether he gave us his permission to do it, he still came and stuck by us and said, I'm with you all regardless. I'm going to be with you all to the end.
The NAACP felt that they couldn't support a large, full-fledged movement down in St. Augustine, so that meant for the time being that we didn't have support from a national organization. The young people were determined not to allow anybody to put a damper on their activities. We had decided to reach out to Dr. King and Reverend Abernathy of the SCLC to see if they could help us out.
Dr. Haling had sent for us when Dr. King came down to St. Augustine. He was sitting on a little plastic red couch. He was leaning back, and Reverend Abernathy, he was sitting over there in the corner, and Dr. King was kind of sitting, kind of leaning with his hat kicked to the side. When we walked in, he got up and said, "Oh, I know about you young people. Job well done. I'm so proud of you."
You see, the SCLC was always on the lookout for localities that had particularly harsh regimes, cities that were oppressive beyond the ordinary limits of Southern society. So we sought out St. Augustine, or to be more precise, St. Augustine sought out us.
Our main request at the time was a biracial committee to give the agreed black citizens a chance to air their grievances before a formal city board. We had enumerated things like allowing blacks to take the police examination so that they could qualify for employment. At that time, other than janitorial and maid service, no blacks worked in City Hall.
At this point, the NAACP removed Dr. Haling from his position with the local chapter, perhaps because local white leaders blamed him for the violence and because the organization had in turn judged him guilty by association.
The city and the powers that be claimed that I inflamed the atmosphere of the community by saying that I was going to shoot first and ask questions later. But it was my house that was shot up in the middle of the night, killing my dog and almost killing my pregnant wife. And it was me and a few other good men who were captured by the Klan during one of their mass rallies, beaten mercilessly, and stacked like firewood on the stage where we waited to be burned alive. I had said I would protect my life and that of my family with all the vim, vigor, and vitality at my command. Now, if that sounds like shoot first and ask questions later, then I have nothing else to say.
But statements of that sort only help in working against us. While your anger is warranted, only through the use of nonviolence would the indignation of the entire country be stirred up in our behalf. Now was the time when we most needed to practice restraint, when violence had already made the national news and the eyes of the nation were on St. Augustine.
They were horrible here, and we never would have thought. We all thought everybody loved one another, that everybody just got along, until we decided that we wanted to integrate and go sit at the counter. No. Then they really went completely crazy. They wanted to kill up all of us.
And the leader of the Klan element here was Haas Minucci, who operated under the guise of the Ancient City Gun Club. How this city could hold a man like Haas Minucci, who was a convicted moonshiner of questionable character, in higher regards than me, a U.S. Air Force veteran who served honorably as an officer, is beyond me.
Martin and I decided to take on the burden of the campaign ourselves by seeking arrest. It was easy enough in St. Augustine. All we had to do was go over to the Monson Motor Lodge, stroll into the dining room, and ask to be served.
I had no intention of going to jail again. But at the church, Dr. King turned to me and said, "I want my little hero to come and go with me in my group." And you can't say no to Dr. King. Not that I want to. So I went back to jail.
The proprietor told us blacks could not be served in his establishment and asked us to leave. We refused, and he called the police. The whole process took less than an hour, and our arrest made the evening news.
I was standing there. I had my little purse. I was dressed, boy, I tell you. We went up, and Dr. King said, "We'd like to enter to be served." And James Brock, the owner of the Monson Motor Lodge, said, "Didn't I tell y'all I wasn't going to? Why y'all keep bothering me?" And then he called the police, and those cars was pulling up, putting us in, throwing us into the cars. They threw Dr. King in the car with the dog, and the dog loved Dr. King. He kissed him.
When word came that we had actually invaded an all-white swimming pool, they quickly used the occasion to denounce us as outside agitators and to ask us that we leave the community, as if the problem were the demonstrations themselves and not the injustices that had provoked the demonstrations.
The federal government had appropriated nearly $400,000, of which $350,000 would be used for their year-long anniversary celebration, much of it centered around the old slave market. Yet, in a city of 20% of the population being black, not one was appointed to any of the committees involving this celebration itself.
They had agreed to consider the idea of a biracial committee precisely because we were there, marching down their main streets, affronting their tourists, embarrassing them nightly on the evening news.
We met with the city's secretary and her tape recorder. The city manager nor the commissioners showed up, and nobody from Washington stayed as promised. We had been outmaneuvered and out-manipulated again.
And we had no intention of leaving, and we told them so. But we did make a counter-proposal. We would stop demonstrations for 1 week if they would appoint a biracial committee immediately. It was only much later that we learned the truth. There was no biracial committee. Governor Byron had simply lied to the press and to the public.
I earned my citizenship beyond being a natural-born Floridian. But as a veteran officer of the United States Air Force, I just feel that I don't have to bow or take second place to anyone. And I shall try to educate my 2 grandsons along the same line that when you're right, stand up for your rights and do not offend or belittle anyone else.
We just didn't want to go to the back door all the time. You want to be able to sit in the front seat like everybody else. You want to be able to sit at the counter and not have to go to the window. You want to sit at the front of the bus, not in the back. Dr. Haling encouraged us in that way. That we could deserve more. We, everybody, deserve the Constitution.
I can say with certainty that we learned to be more cautious and less trusting during our confrontations in St. Augustine, specifically with Sheriff Davis and Hans Manussi. These lessons applied in Selma and everywhere else. They were valuable in preparing us for a much more violent future.
St. Augustine, to me, remains the same. They gave you a little and then snatched it right back. I feel like with the civil rights movement and the part we played, made a huge difference to a certain extent. But it also made us lose a lot of our history, and that's the hurting part of it all.
I make frequent visits back to St. Augustine. Some say that I'm crazy, and what have you, because we still see Confederate flags and everything, and we know there's a racist element in the city today. It's just that people with hatred within their hearts. God created me brown and you a different color. It doesn't require for you to have something I can't have. We're all here and deserve the same thing.